Thank you for watching the CEO Barbecue. My name is Antonio, and today I'll be looking for gold and hopefully maybe a little bit of copper too up in northern BC, specifically in the Tudagun region, together with Dr. Ewan Webster, the CEO of Thesis Gold. Before we get into the actual interview, though, I'd like to warn you that we have received monetary compensation for the production of this video from the company that's being interviewed. Please understand that this channel is a business that sells content producing services to companies, which means you cannot rely on this video for research, and you should treat this as an advertisement instead. Research is conducted by reading the company's official filings, which you can find on setterplus.ca. Please only watch this if you know what you're doing. This interview is intended only for experienced junior mining speculators because mineral exploration, development, and mining is a very tough business where failure is the norm. This is going to be a conversation that is general and impersonal in nature, containing forward-looking statements. I am not a licensed financial advisor, so before continuing on, please talk to an investment advisor with a good long-term track record because your capital is at risk, and I am neither a licensed financial advisor nor do I have a good long-term track record. If you're not 100% sure you understand 100% of the disclaimers I just showed you and told you about, please go to the last section of this video and do not consume this content unless you fully understand and agree with everything said therein. That all said, Thesis is listed as TAU, that's TAU, on the TSX Ventures Exchange, where over the last 3 months, an average of about 750,000 shares have traded daily. Their 52-week high is $1.04, and their 52-week low is 51 cents. With a market cap of 187.5 million Canadian dollars and about 213 million shares outstanding, today this is an 88-cent stock. I'm not doing a full company overview here today because Ewan and I have had multiple conversations over the past year, and all of them will be in the Thesis Gold playlist on the Resource Stocks YouTube channel. But there is a new financial statement that's been published since we last spoke, so I'll briefly go through that here. Now, this one shows me the numbers as of November 30, and the asset side of the balance sheet at the time had $9.8 million in current assets on it. 3.3 million was in the form of cash and cash equivalents, as well as $4.8 million in mineral exploration tax credit receivables, whereas the liability side had a total of about $22 million on it, the vast majority of which, so $17.2 million, as we've talked about before, is deferred taxes, so not actual debt, as well as a $2.5 million asset retirement obligation, which is also not actual debt that has to be paid right now. The only real liability here is actually the $1.3 million account payables and accrued liabilities under the current liability side of the balance sheet. And it is also worth noting, though, that the company did close a $10 million private placement on December 17. And then after that, just about a week or so ago, they announced a strategic investment from Centerra to the tune of over $24 million. So the balance sheet likely looks quite different today. Moving on to the P&L for the 9 months that ended on November 30, the total expense shows up as $3.6 million, although not all of that was a cash cost, since this included about $1 million in share-based compensation for the period. Overall, the out-of-pocket cost or the out-of-pocket spend was about in line, actually a little lower than the same period in 2023, with a decrease mostly due to a drop in management and consulting fees. All in all, this maths up to about an average of $275,000 a month in administrative expenses, with marketing and IR accounting for about 36% of that money, and management, consulting, and professional fees accounting for about half of it, so 48% to be specific in total across those three, with office and miscellaneous making up the rest of the cost. As to the exploration spend for the same 9-month period, those expenses with Thesis, they get capitalized, so you can find them under Note 5 in the financials, which shows me an almost $8 million exploration spend for the period, where drilling itself was the largest chunk of that spend, accounting for about 30% of that $8 million spent, whereas field work is about 20% of it, and engineering work was about 19%, with various smaller expenses like environmental, community relations, road maintenance, and so on and so forth, making up the rest. As always, though, I've got two ratios from this financial statement. The first one is your overall exploration to administration ratio, which here shows up as almost 3.5 to 1, meaning almost 3.5 times as much money went or was spent on exploration than what was spent on running the company. And in percentages, that means that less than 25% of the overall spend went toward G&A. And then the second is the drilling and assays to marketing ratio, which comes out to a little under 3, meaning almost 3 times as much money was spent on drilling and assays as what was spent on marketing. As always, though, please go to setterplus.ca yourself. Make sure you're getting the right numbers and the right interpretation, because try as I may, I'm not infallible, so I could be making some mistakes here. That all said, again, there are multiple company interviews in the Thesis Gold playlist that cover the story in depth, but in a nutshell here, briefly, Thesis is currently advancing its 100% owned lawyers and ranch project in, again, the Toodoggin district of BC within the Golden Triangle, with lawyers being a low sulfidation vein-hosted gold and silver deposit, and ranch being a high sulfidation lithocap with a copper and gold overprint, which is possibly also porphyry related, which is also going to be an important part to talk about here later today. When combined, the lawyers ranch PEA that Thesis published last year accounted for $1,930 gold price, $24 silver price, which resulted then in an after-tax NPV5 of 1.2 billion Canadian dollars and a post-tax IRR of over 35%, with a 2-year payback period for the initial $600 million capex, which the PEA says would result in a mine that can operate for just over 14 years, with an average annual gold equivalent production for the LOM of 215,000 ounces. And then the path to production here is envisioned toward the end of this decade, with an EA decision expected in 2028 after a feasibility study and a detailed engineering study, which is planned for next year. In the meantime, a lot of drilling has been going on, as well as a few things have changed, again, on the corporate level with the Centerra thing. So, Ewan, you and I have quite a lot of catching up to do, but first things first, thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. Yeah, and yeah, I appreciate it.
Well, pleasure's all mine, of course, since I think the last time you and I spoke was over a half a year ago, something like that, at the Beaver Creek conference. And I'm glad you're no longer sunburned. So that's actually a good starting point. But how's everything been going actually since then? More specifically, how have you found the reception of the thesis? Thesis, I guess, since you've been going to conferences and marketing the new PA and so on and so forth. How's everything been?
It's been really good, yeah. I mean, I guess the last time we caught up at Beaver Creek, that was just after we announced the PEA, and I, I mean, extremely well received, as you said. I mean, the project economics are excellent, the production profile is really good, and I think there's opportunity to improve on that as well. I mean, post PEA, that took about a year and a half to post, I guess, after the merger to get to that point, and that was the kind of final piece in the puzzle that we put together. And then on the back of that, it was pushing that story, but plus, what we've got planned for the next 12 to 18 months as well. And I think, that the plan that we've got in place has been received very well as well.
Well, it looks like it's been received very well by Centerra too, which I want to talk about here. They've paid a 10% premium to your price. They're buying a 9.9% ownership in Thesis. And you actually call this a strategic investment, but as far as I understand it, at least for now, there's no JV, there's no toll milling agreement or nothing operational really. So how is this? How's this a strategic investment? Where's the strategic part?
So I think, yeah, I mean, a lot of these investments are probably not that strategic, but I mean, for us, I think Centerra is a very strategic partner. Partly because they have an operating mine in British Columbia. I mean, they've got Mount Milligan, which is about 300-ish kilometers just south of us. But more importantly, they've got the Kemess asset, which is about 45 kilometers to the southeast of the Lawyers project. And for those of you who are not familiar with that, it was a past producer. It produced about 3 million ounces of gold and 750 million pounds of copper from a large open pit porphyry deposit. There's a big mill there as well, 50,000 ton per day nameplate mill, a camp, it's fully permitted, tailings, etc. And it went into care and maintenance, sorry, in 2012, and I think they just depleted the pit basically. But there is a huge underground reserve as well, where a number of companies, including Centerra, have looked at potential block cave, but also other scenarios to mine that higher grade portion in the underground. So I think over the last couple of years, Centerra has been pretty quiet on it, but more recently and in the last quarterly statements, there's certainly a lot more enthusiasm around the Kemess asset, and they seem to be making moves. So, from our perspective, tapping into kind of their deep expertise of working in BC, operating in BC, looking at epithermal and porphyry deposits, and also, what synergies are there around, potentially utilizing some of that infrastructure that they have in place just 45 kilometers from us. I think that's what makes this strategic for us.
Hmm. How did that investment happen, by the way? Did they approach you or did you approach them? Yeah, what would happen?
I honestly can't remember off the top of my head. I mean, the due diligence process took a long time. It was probably kind of 6+ months ago. And, part of the reason I can't really remember is that we actually use their camp at Kemess at the moment for all of the kind of baseline work and engineering work that we're doing through the winter months. It's just more cost effective to utilize that than it is to have our own. So, we've been in constant communication and dialogue for years. And so I'm not quite sure what tipped it over the edge there more recently. But yeah, I mean, just to kind of expand on the due diligence process and that 6 month plus period, I guess it was nice to have them. I guess one of the knocks I got on the project a lot was, on paper, this thing looks fantastic. Why is there no strategic involved? And it's, what are the red flags here that we don't see when we don't have access to all the data? From my perspective, it's nice to have now Centerra take a position. They obviously gone through a pretty significant due diligence process, looking at not only all the geological information, but environmental data, permitting, the company as a whole. So it's a really good stamp of approval, I think, on the not only the asset, but also the company.
Hmm. Well, I'm also trying to dig into what else this move might mean here. So is this telling us something more along the lines of Thesis is going to go for more consolidation in the district, or is this more about Centerra again, potentially? I don't know, and I'm speculating, arm waving here, but buying lawyers and ranch off of you. How do you see which direction do you see it going?
I mean, I think for us at the moment, there's no strings attached to that capital. So it's, I think Centerra's happy with the direction that we've been going in, and it's, keep doing what you're doing, keep advancing the Lawyer's Ranch project, and let's see how that evolves. And you know that. So I guess from a consolidation point of view for us, we're not looking at consolidating anything anytime soon. I mean, we've got so much upside that still remains in our project that I think our capital's best spent evaluating those targets before we look
Hmm.
elsewhere. And then from a Centerra standpoint, I mean, I don't know. I don't. That's just speculation. I mean, I think obviously they like the project enough in the direction that we're going in to get a toehold position. And, let's see where that goes over the coming months to years. There is notably a 12-month standstill in the IRA, where, so they don't have the option to acquire us within that 12-month period if they were to try and do so. But they do have the ability to go up to 14.9% with just buying stock on the market basically.
And I can almost see you bursting with enthusiasm to talk about porphyries when you say you have upside. And I have the same thing. I want to talk about porphyries. We'll get to it for sure. But did you talk to any of the local communities before this deal? And really why I'm asking this, maybe a little bit of background to explain why I'm even asking this in the first place. But Centerra has had some historical issues and not that far up in the past either. But in Kyrgyzstan, they had that legal battle for a very long time. And then after that, in Turkey, they also had their operation suspended due to environmental permitting issues, I believe. But I believe it has something to do with mercury and leaching pad issues, but or allegedly because that's being resolved too. They did restart production after that. But my point or my question here is, how is Centerra perceived within BC, specifically by the local stakeholders from the perspective again of ESG and just social acceptability, I guess.
I mean, I think quite well. I could honestly speak to that in any sort of detail, what the stakeholder perception of them is. But from our standpoint, we have a fantastic relationship with our four nation member partners, and I think that's only going to improve in the coming years as well. And right now for Centerra, it's a 9.9 position, and we're very much still moving the project forward under the assumption that this is going to be a standalone asset. So, and we've got strong support from our nations to continue doing that. So, yeah, it would just be speculation.
Yeah. Well, I do know that you've always done a good job of consulting and working with the communities. I even saw that as part of your exploration spend, you actually recorded almost, at least over the last reported period, it's almost 100 grand a month for community relations. What's that? What exactly are you doing in terms of community engagement, and what's that money being spent on?
It's spent on a number of things. I mean, there's some capacity funding there to help with ongoing review of studies. So for each of the nations, I mean, they have their own kind of environmental wing or engineering wing. So Saskatchewan environmental, Chucho environmental, and then the engineering component as well. And they actually execute all of our they helped us develop the baseline program and then they executed that work for us. So it's some capacity funding around, evaluating those studies for their lands departments and stuff. It's, helping with various commitments in the communities. It is helping to sponsor events. It is a range of things. But also, some of that capital doesn't go directly to the nations. It's for, you know, working on permitting, um, working on the EA process, and so it falls into that bucket of capital, but it's not directly going to the nations.
Well, I'm asking that because you see these headlines, and I've heard from a couple of CEOs I've spoken to as well that challenges in BC are kind of growing, especially from the social acceptability perspective to mining. But it seems like you haven't experienced much of that, have you?
No, and I think we've done a very good job of working with our member nations from kind of day one and making sure that everybody was engaged and up to speed on what our plans were. And I'm proud of that, to be honest. And I think at this point we've awarded tens of millions of dollars in contracts to nations owned and operated companies. So they've really benefited from the growth and the success of the project. And we have a number of different committees in place. One of them being a business opportunities committee, where we meet on a kind of monthly basis, and we ideally give any contracts that we can to the nations where they're able to fulfill them, whether that's kind of collecting the baseline data, whether it's infrastructure upgrades so they get all the yellow iron contracts, whether that is kind of engineering, whether it's on-site personnel and heavy equipment operation, whether it's just working in the core shack, cut shack. But ideally, we utilize the nation's ability as much as possible to be involved in the project, and even things like, I mean, in the PEA, the tailings location, for example, when we went into that process, I think we had 7 or 8 different options available to us. And that wasn't our first choice. That was through the consultation with the nations and working with them to choose that TSF facility. So there's a lot of engagement on all aspects of that. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's a very topical thing. So I'm glad you're thinking a lot about it, and also putting your money where your mouth is as well, funding the right stuff there. The To go back to the Centerra thing, I'm thinking in an event, and again, this is forward looking, all that, but in event of a potential future M&A, does Centerra have some kind of a ROFR or first offer or veto power or something else among those lines?
No, nothing like that. Yeah, I mean, the agreement is very straightforward and pretty simple, and there's no hooks or anything in there like that.
Okay.
They have the ability to, as I said, there's a 12-month standstill within that. They can go up to 14.9%. And then there was, a couple of things in there. Like if they buy more shares on the market post 12-month standstill and end up at 19.9%, they can get a board seat. And I think they have to vote with management for the next 2 years. They have a right to maintain their position, so they can go for any finance and arms, they go pro rata on it. But that's about it. It's pretty straightforward.
Right. Are they now actively involved in helping you bring the PFS over the line, or in any of the technical aspects of the project?
Not directly involved in the PFS or moving that forward. I mean, that's been led by Asenco and Mining Plus, and that's kind of full steam ahead, still on track for Q1 next year. But we've now set up a technical committee, which is two representatives from Thesis and two from Centerra, and I see this as a very positive aspect to the agreement. I mean, as we talked about earlier, they have an operating mine in BC, it's a porphyry deposit. They've got Kemess, which is both porphyry and epithermal mineralization on it. They've got a strong technical team, both geological and engineering and production side of things. So it gives us a lot of opportunity to kind of lean on them, utilize their experience, and help refine our drill programs. I mean, Evan Autobahn, our chief geologist that joined us in February, he's a world-renowned epithermal and porphyry expert, and he's kind of designing the program at the moment. But it is nice to have that technical expertise within Centerra to lean on, and they don't have any. They're not allowed to decide what we spend the capital on or where the drilling happens, but certainly we're going to take their advice and guidance in
Hmm.
the account anyway.
If you keep saying porphyry over and over again, we might have to make this a 2 or 3 hour conversation. But how much money do you have right now? Now that they've given you what, almost 24 million bucks, you did the financing before that, you had your own cash. How much money do you have now?
We have just over 35 million in the
Okay.
treasury, so we're in a good position. Yeah.
Does that mean no more capital raises before the PFS?
Um, I wouldn't commit to that. I mean, so all of those are hard dollars that we have in the treasury at the moment, and we can be pretty opportunistic, I think, and if there's potential to raise a little bit of flow through to help with some exploration drilling in the summer, we may look at that, but certainly don't have to. And the BCMETC credits were renewed as well. So even if we do spend hard dollars on our exploration drilling, we get the tax benefit back anyway. So it's we're in a good position.
Flow through is not something you can use toward the PFS, if I'm not mistaken, though. That's only exploration specific, right?
Yeah, that's it. Correct. Yeah, purely it has to be spent exactly on exploration.
Well, I definitely want to talk about the exploration part again, but what more work do you have to do before the PFS, and when do you think you're going to have that out?
So all that remains for the PFS at this point is like a little bit of desktop study. We've got a metallurgical program that's going on at the moment, which is really just looking at refining what we already have. I mean, you know from the last time, like the recoveries here are fantastic. 95% for gold, 92% for silver. There's no metallurgical nightmares. There's no deleterious elements in here. It's very clean. It's a simple flow sheet. It's really just looking at tweaking that. So that's and aside from that, it's the desktop study part of doing the PFS. So that's all on track. Looks like early Q4 this year. We should be able to get that out to market. And I think it'll look pretty similar to the PEA in terms of like scope and scale. I don't think there's going to be any kind of big material changes in there, certainly at the moment from where we're at going through the process. So to get to the PFS, we don't have to do anything, which is great. But what we're looking at also doing this year, and we talked about it a little bit here, is a pretty significant exploration program this summer, where let's say it's going to be discovery focused. I think we've got 4.7 million ounces, great grades, strong production profile, great economics. The incremental resource growth at this time, going 5 million ounces, 5.5, 6, I don't think we're going to be necessarily rewarded for that. I mean, the potential is clearly there. I think what we're going to do is really focus on leveraging the upside that still remains on the projects. And that's, testing the high sulfidation epithermal gold system at Ranch. That's, right at surface, test a range of new targets. And then also, you know, with Evan on board now, with the success that's been happening in Tudagon as well in terms of like porphyry discoveries. I mean, I think that gives us a bit more conviction to drill some deeper holes, test some porphyry targets. So that's really exciting. And that's kind of what's about to play out this summer. And we'll put out a press release pretty soon, I think, outlining what that summer program is going to look like, how many meters we're going to do, where they're going to be focused, but probably a little bit at lawyers, kind of expanding the underground, but then the lion's share of it's going to be focused on the ranch project and the discovery potential that still remains there. And we're going to kick it off with probably a pretty significant IP program to look deep to really try and define some of those targets. So that, yeah, that'd be great. Get that beginning June and roll through the rest of the summer, and then kind of drill results beginning probably early September, and then right through for the remainder of the year. And yeah, the other really main catalyst for this year is beginning the permitting. So we're looking at beginning permitting probably around September timeframe, and it's nice to have, both the federal and provincial government, pushing major infrastructure projects, and recognizing that we're a resource a country, and we need to start basically trying to develop some of these assets in a more timely manner. So yeah, I think that'll be a big catalyst for us.
It is time for Canada is a resource rich country, so it's time for it to start behaving like one. Although it's going to be
Yeah.
interesting to see how the new, not so new administration is going to deal with that as well. What is the again, lots to touch upon. You kind of front running a lot of my questions there, but there has
Sorry.
been some geotechnical. But no, you don't have to apologize. You're doing my work for me, and my work is already pretty simple, so I always appreciate that. But there has been some geotechnical, but in general, just also just good geological insights from your 2024 drill program as well. A couple of technical things there that I wanted to go through. So again, you're coming up with dicite and white mica with silica alteration showing up at Thesis 2, which is a classical high sulfidation signature, which I suppose is good in your case. But are you seeing vertical zonation consistent with telescope systems, or is this just kind of a lateral overprint, if you will?
It is, so you don't see any telescoping at Thesis 2. What we do see though is kind of stratigraphic control on the mineralization. So, I mean, these are main fault structure, fault network, let's say at Ranch, that controls the mineralization. So fluids have kind of come up the faults. And then where we've interacted with different kind of geological layers or different stratigraphic units. Sometimes the fluids come up and then they migrate along kind of, because the layers here are relatively flat, so they come up, migrate along, and you get gold mineralization coming out into them. So there can be a kind of horizontal control to the mineralization, but not in a telescoping nature. But I think what we're seeing at Ranch so far is, I mean, if you think about it, the conceptual porphyry model, you've got this big heat engine at depth, then you've got fluids coming off that, then you've got a lithocap high sulfidation environment above it. And, I was just talking to Evan about this the other day, and he was saying, what he thinks that we have at on surface anyway at the moment at Ranch is basically just a lot of like these little kind of burps that have come up, but all of that will basically come back down into like some sort of main feeder structure that's coming off the top of the porphyry. And if you look at other major HS systems worldwide, the lion's share of the mineralization is always in that kind of primary zone. So you can imagine having this primary zone, and then you have a bunch of things coming off it like this. So I mean that's really exciting because and right now at Ranch we've got about 700,000 ounces at just over 2 grams. I think we've got a lot of targets. I think we're going to be able to grow those, and if that's just us scratching the surface, what does that mean for the potential that exists at depth?
Mm. That would have been my follow-up question. The alteration zone here, or the alteration here, whether it is zoned in a way that might help you vector into that feeder zone or just higher grade zones or something like that. So that's what you're saying essentially. I mean, alteration here is not disseminated; it is zoned in kind of a favorable way that might guide your exploration to that higher grade zone. Am I getting that correctly?
So I think I mean, on surface, what you see is basically, there's kind of a 40 square kilometer zone that is of altered rocks. So the original rocks are volcanic rocks, and they've been altered by the fluids kind of pumping through them. And then you have different types of alteration depending on how close you are to the hotter temperature fluids, basically. So typically adjacent to the faults, and you get the more kind of advanced argillic alteration and the dicite, alunite, the higher temperature micas and clays. And as you get out from that, you end up with just like kind of more massive silicas and more propylitic alteration as well. And there's not a lot of outcrop at Ranch. So a lot of the targets are blind, and we've outcrop where we do have outcrop is typically to silica because it's more resistant, but it's pretty hard to put together a zonation map from that. But what we've been doing is, we've collected comprehensive geochem data across the entire project, basically. And, that's rock samples where we have exposed rock, but, property-wide soil samples that, you know, looking at the specific geochemical signatures, I mean, there's certain elements like moly, for example, um, it's a very good vector for the kind of higher temperature porphyry type signature. So we've got some strong targets that are essentially right in the middle of that broader alteration system. So the IP actually that I mentioned earlier, that is going to be focused on looking at deep below those geochem signatures on surface that fall within right in the heart of the broader alteration system.
Hmm. Are you also modeling any magnetic or resistivity inversions kind of beneath the cap?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, so we've been doing that, and then the IP is really going to come in and complement that. It's looking at both chargeability and resistivity, and I think in this district it seems like the porphyries are related with like big chargeability highs and kind of subdued resistivity responses. So yeah, I mean, if we see anything like that early on in the IP data set, that'll be pretty encouraging.
And bingo is a big part of that, I assume as well, because it's showing copper gold zones, and thesis too is showing in that's the high sulfidation epithermal textures. Do you is your internal thesis, and I suppose you cannot commit to anything, but is your internal thesis that you now think that that's kind of a porphyry feeding the lower ends of the system under your high sulfidation overprint, but do you think based on what's happened in BC recently that it might be closer to surface than previously thought, or how deep would you guess it is?
It's very difficult to answer.
Hmm.
I mean, the where we are in the whole package of rocks, there's a very important horizon between what is called like the Takla group and the rock above it, which are the Tutagon Formation, and is that horizon is basically where all of the major deposits are found, not only in the Tutagon, but also right around into the Golden Triangle, same rocks, same ages of mineralization. And that's the key kind of horizon. It's just a time horizon, basically. Anything around 200 million years old. For example, Chemess, the actual Chemess porphyry system is 202 million years old. So it's it, then looking at anything above that line in terms of the rock package, it's several kilometers thick, and you want to be obviously as close to the bottom of it as possible, or that seems to be where most of the porphyry epithermal mineralization is, and we're at Ranch, we're close to the bottom, so I can't answer your question like in a detailed sense, and that I can't point to a specific number, but it could be a few hundred meters, could be a couple of kilometers. So it's pretty hard to tell. But near surface, fantastic. You can open pit deposits like Kamas, fantastic. But even for like if it is deeper, if it's about 1% copper equivalent, then you can effectively mine that underground, no problem.
Well, and I suppose that the IP is going to guide your decision as well. But why I'm asking how deep it might be is because I want to know how deep you're going to go chasing it. So this first pass drill program, how deep are the holes going to be?
So the 3 to 5, let's say, deeper targets, we might only 3 to 5 holes, but they could be anywhere from like a few hundred meters to a kilometer.
Hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
How much is that going to cost, especially the deeper drilling?
It depends if it's skid rig or heli supported. So our skid rig costs right now are about, I'd say, $650 a meter, and then if it's anything that's heli supported, it's probably about 900. Um, and I was talking to somebody this other day, but when I first started working on this project back in 2018, our drill costs were about $225 a meter, to give you a sense of like how much has gone up over that time. So we're in a very fortunate position that basically all of that work has been completed. And at this point, we can scale up or down the exploration, as capital is available, as the market allows for it. So but we don't have to go back in and do a big infill drill program, I guess is what I'm getting at. We have the critical mass to move forward, and really all our drilling here is discovery focused.
How are the porphyry targets? How are they topographically? Are they more challenging than your other work that you want to do this year?
No, not at all. Yeah, I mean they're just basically right in the mix of the kind of main alteration system at Ranch. So it's the fortunate thing that we have is being a few hundred kilometers inland from coastal British Columbia, we don't have the rugged topography they do on the coast. We don't have any glaciers. We don't get 10 meters of snow a year. We're subalpine to alpine plateaus, but just broad rolling valleys between them, and with an extensive road network. So it's logistically very straightforward to operate there, whether that's as part of the exploration program or even, thinking ahead, it'll be very simple to operate an open pit mine here year round.
Hmm. It, so that's you said June, right? That you want to start doing that work and know essentially. So essentially, we're gonna know if there's a porphyry there by the end of September. Is that fair to say?
I'd say I mean, with the targets that we have this year, I think we would have a good sense, yes. Whether we'd have those results out or not by then is probably unlikely, because they'll have to be interpreted and go to the lab and stuff. And they'll be some of the later targets drilled, I would say. We'll probably start with the gold epithermal system at surface. And, as the IP data comes in and we evaluate it and refine our drill targeting, those targets will slot in the latter part of the summer program. So probably sometime into the fall, but obviously we'd have a good sense straight away if we're into something.
Why I'm asking about the timing specifically on the porphyry stuff is because I'm thinking if you do drill into a porphyry this year, what does that do to the other timelines that you've given me, like the PFS by early Q4? Again, if you hit some kind of amazing hole or whatever, does that put your PFS on hold? Would you want to put account for it next year or something like? Yeah, what does that do to your timelines?
No, not at all. I mean, I think the PFS will just continue on the timeline it's on, and it'll be evaluating the gold system at surface. And frankly, if we do discover a porphyry, it takes a lot of drilling to drill those off, and that's a lot of capital, a lot of dilution. We'd have to evaluate at the time if it made sense to do that, or if it makes sense to just kind of proceed with the plan that we have in place at the moment, and put the project into production, and then you could look at doing the drilling from free cash flow once it's operating to flush out the porphyry system. You could, talk to Centerra potentially about utilizing CMS that's already set up to operate for copper porphyry deposits. You could, I mean, there's a lot of options there. And I think it would have to be evaluated post-discovery, I mean, that's a good position to be in for sure.
Yeah. And it is forward looking and all these things, and I understand that part
Yeah.
again that you cannot commit to it, but it's still interesting to theorize about it, specifically in light of what's happened there in the district. But so is it fair to say that you're a believer of there being undiscovered flat lying porphyries in BC?
100%. And I mean, we might have talked about this before, and then you can see my enthusiasm coming out again. But it's for the longest time, I've been pushing the Tutagon and pushing, our project. And, historically, the perception was that these are small, high-grade gold silver deposits, epithermal deposits that don't have the legs to bulk out into, multi-million ounce systems. I think over the last 7 years, we've proven that's not the case. And then that it was thought that Chemes was some sort of unicorn. And it's just like fundamentally, that's not how geology works. Like it's just not how it works. And my argument was always like we've not spent enough exploration dollars here to properly evaluate the Tutagon, and it's the same ages of rock, same styles of mineralization, same ages of mineralization as the Golden Triangle to the west, where billions of dollars have been spent in exploration. We've seen a fraction of that. It's now nice to see, Centerra, Freeport, some other producers in the area spending capital, making discoveries. I mean, that discovery that Freeport and AMark made, gold copper porphyry system right at surface, had never been drilled before. Huge alteration system, phenomenal grades. I mean, there will be more of these. It's just a question of spending the capital to find them.
Hmm. Well, why I'm asking that, or where I'm going with this, because when I saw that happening, I started thinking about Thesis, and I was like, does this not place you in almost a challenging situation here? Because what do you do from here on out? Like, do you still keep treating lawyers and ranch as kind of their own independent thing, or do you go and build a unified porphyry district model with an epithermal cap on it and approach exploration from that theory? Because essentially there's two things, they're two very different things, right? If it's a whole porphyry district, you don't approach it from the exploration side, you don't approach it as two standalones, lawyers and ranch. So I don't even know how to put this into a question, but how do you think about lawyers and ranch now? Do you still treat them as their own independent thing, or are you starting to think more about that unified porphyry district model here?
I mean, I think we've always been thinking about it as a district, as like a porphyry district. I mean, we just fortunate that we have the upper parts of the porphyry environment preserved. I mean, because it's all just one system, and we just have the upper parts of it preserved. Whereas in most of British Columbia, those have all been eroded away over the last couple 100 million years. We're just fortunate that that these areas were preserved. So we have been exploring with that mindset, but I think, you know, it's a this is a gold silver system as it stands for us, and we're moving ahead with permitting, with the PFS as a 5 million ounce deposit, basically, and then the fantastic thing about our project is there's still so much upside,
Mm.
whether that's in the epithermal environment or the porphyry environment. But, we'll spend a small portion of the exploration budget and a small portion of our resources to evaluate that porphyry potential. There's not going to be any wholehearted swing to chase porphyry systems or anything now. It's, continue with what we're doing and set aside a portion of the budget and the resources to test that potential, which is, I mean, it's exciting, and I think we have more conviction to do that now because of the discovery that's been made. So it's an exciting place to be working at the moment.
Well, I definitely want to see a couple of holes there and a couple of deep holes, but then again, I'm more of a cowboy than a geologist myself. So you do the risk management. I'll do the getting excited part. I did notice that going back to bingo here, so jumping around a little bit, but I did notice that at bingo, hole 8 ended in mineralization as well. So was that below the planned pit bottom? And if yes, is that going to change the pit shell design, or are you keeping the original what is it, Lurik's Grossman constraints? I believe that's what they put in.
Yeah, so I mean, I think at Ranch, like it's it's all the pits will change at Ranch. And I think with more work, Bingo will see some drilling this year for sure. I mean, it's the northern part of the Thesis structural corridor. It's open. We keep discovering new mineralization, exactly as you mentioned. We discovered some other parallel zones there in previous years as well. And I think there's a lot more work to be done to flush that out. And those pits are definitely going to change in scale and size in the coming years as more work's completed there.
Hmm. Is it?
I
Can
think
we?
that sorry, I was just going to say, I mean, I think that statement's probably applicable to all of the deposits at Ranch at the moment. Of the 700,000 ounces that we have there in the resource, there was probably only 300,000 or 400,000 ounces made it into the PEA, and less than that will make it into the PFS because it's a certain component of it was inferred ounces, and you need measured and indicated for the PFS. But as I said, Ranch is really the blue sky here. It's going to receive the lion's share of all the exploration, drilling, and focus going forward. So I very much believe that they're going to continue to grow and will make new discoveries, and the landscape at Ranch will be very different in the coming several years.
Could this change so much so that it turns into an underground combination of or an open pit and then an underground portion?
Yeah, definitely. I think, I mean, you see that at Lawyers. I mean, Lawyers started out as just open pit, and as we kept drilling, it kept expanding at depth. And at some point, the pits will only pull so deep. And right now, they pulled about 350 meters, and then it transitions to underground below that. Is that possible at Ranch? Yeah, definitely.
Hmm. So what's you said the majority of the drilling is not going to happen here, but what's a plan for what's the 2025 plan for Bingo?
I am not 100% sure yet. It will definitely get some drilling, but I'm waiting on Evan to present to us, how he wants to spend the drill budget, basically.
Hmm. Um, that's kind of how it goes with me and my wife as well. Most of the time I'm just waiting for her to tell me how she's going to drill a hole in my wallet. Different topic though. Talking about going deeper, this program also help you better understand the hydrogeological models. Is anything different, anything worrying showing up in at depth here from the water perspective? I mean, any aquifers or water bearing structures that could kind of complicate the dewater or require dewatering or increase the permitting sensitivity of the project or anything like that?
I don't think so. No, nothing jumps out. It's pretty, from my understanding of it anyway, it's pretty simple system. The water here is really clean. I mean, interestingly, so they from the historic work they did at Lawyers, the main portal entrance at the Cliff Creek, or the portal entrance, I should say, at Cliff Creek, it's closed up, but their water is filtering from the surface down through the mine workings and then coming out the portal entrance. And for a number of years, we were responsible for basically testing that water to make sure there was no contaminants or anything in it. So we just periodically test it. And when we first started that, the sample that we sent to the government, they didn't actually believe us. So we had to resample it, send it to them again, and it was essentially the same. And that was because it was essentially drinking water. I mean, it's pristine. I mean, I think that speaks to the metallurgy that's here. There's no deleterious elements in it. The water's very clean, but we're also in the kind of subalpine to alpine, so there's no big river systems, there's no big lakes or anything. From a hydrogeological standpoint, it's just a normal water table that's pretty close to surface, and we're yeah.
So no fault connected groundwater flow or anything like that either.
It'll be connected with the fault systems and stuff, yeah, for sure. But I don't see that as being kind of overly problematic or anything.
Hmm. Well, I really only ask that question so that I can hear you say water in that Scottish accent a couple of times more. I always enjoy that. And
My wife is a hydrogeologist,
okay.
and it's all water related stuff, and but the way she says water is like water, but she does it for like the Canadian audience basically, whereas yeah, I'm just a butcher in my Scottish accent.
So is your wife Scottish too?
Yeah, she is. Yeah,
Oh, okay, that makes sense. Well, those conversations must be amazing. Those dinner conversations as well. So, does she have a PhD too?
she doesn't. No, no, we don't do a lot of geology chat at the dinner table. As you can imagine, that'd be pretty dry.
Well, I don't know. It's about hydrogeology, so that's not as dry, I suppose. I'm sorry. I'll show myself out. That was uncalled for. Um, in terms of what about in terms of geotechnical stability? What's going on here? I mean, anything new or different rock masses or anything that you've encountered or anything that's changed your understanding of the stability of the underground stuff?
No, we're pretty fortunate here that based outside of certainly fact, it goes for around both deposits. Outside of the mineralized zones, the rock is very competent, which is good. I mean, it certainly helps with pit wall stability and steepening up the pit wall. And basically all the geotech work is done for the feasibility pre-feas. And a lot is done for the feasibility as well, to be honest. I think the remaining geotechnical work that we need to do really is looking at evaluating the underground at lawyers and maybe some deeper stuff at ranch as well. But so there'll be a small portion this summer, hopefully multi-purpose holes that can serve as geotech holes as well as exploration holes on the deeper parts of the underground system at lawyers. But very competent rock, no major challenges there, which we're relieved about.
But essentially, you don't think you'll have to revisit pit slope angles or strip ratios or anything for the upcoming PFS?
Oh, it's constantly being revisited. Yeah, I mean it's because the consultant for the PFS is different than what we had for the PEA. They kind of have different standards. They evaluate things differently, and that's an ongoing iterative process. Yeah.
Hmm. I know I've kind of caught you on a busy day here, so I'm kind of running through these questions because I know you have to go. What happens in the meantime so you're going to have the drill plan released sometime soon, and then drilling in June, and then results in September. But what happens kind of in the meantime?
So in the meantime, yeah, we're just planning for the drill program that then will kick off June. Permitting is going to begin in September, PFS out early Q4. So, major catalyst rich year for us coming up, and then drill results through the fall. So I think 2025 shaping up to be another really strong year for us as we continue to move the project forward and de-risk it. I mean, and from my perspective, I think that's one of the huge advantages of this project is that we tick a lot of boxes. I mean, we're in a great jurisdiction. We've got a district scale land position. Are we've got a big resource that is open for growth. The project economics, even as it stands with the PEA, are excellent with a great production profile. It's a brownfield development site with all the infrastructure in place. We've got strong First Nation support. That we're a strategic partner now, and as we talked about at the beginning, it's legitimately strategic. There's good possibilities to utilize infrastructure in the area, and you know how many projects in North America tick all those boxes that are development stage assets that actually could go into production? I mean, I think, and I'll circle back here, with what the plan that we've got for 2025 and as we continue to de-risk it, I think that, we're going to close the valuation gap as we move towards a construction decision here. And what appears to be, an extremely good commodity market. Maybe we'll get one of these bull markets that everybody talks about. And, I think an M&A space is certainly heating up.
Hmm. I understand it ticks a lot of boxes, and you are right to mention these things for sure, but nothing's really ever perfect. So obligatory question, as I ask you each time, what keeps you up at night? If you had a magic stick, what would you wave it at to change or improve on something?
I think permitting. I mean,
Hmm.
it's kind of out of our control to a certain extent. I mean, I think we're doing everything that we can to mitigate the risk of that extending. And, right now, as we talked about, 3 to 3.5 years is what we're targeting. There'll be deep engagement with our First Nation members and the province coming out and saying that they're, looking to expedite permits. As you mentioned, it's a resource country. It's nice to see that they're acknowledging that now and trying to expedite the permits.
Hmm.
So, firing on all cylinders here to keep on track.
Hmm. I was just pulling up your SETI filings. I see you've been buying some in the open market late last year to help close that valuation gap. Are you going to be part of it? Are you going to be on the bid in 2025 buying more in the open market?
I think, yeah, I mean, and we've talked about this before, and periodically, yes, I'll continue to buy. Obviously, I've been blacked out for a while dealing with, Centerra, and there's a few other initiatives that we're working on at the moment. But yeah, I'll continue to be buying on the market.
Yeah. Well, you're one of the few people who we actually spoke about this again about a year ago, maybe even longer than a year ago. And I asked you, and you're like, yeah, I'm going to buy some. And then you actually did buy some. So that is actually a rarity to do what you said you're going to do in the Canadian markets. So I guess that's where the Scottish part comes in as well. But yeah,
Yeah,
I know you
I
have to
know.
go here. I've kept you for too long now already, Ewan, but thank you so much for your time. What am I forgetting to ask you here quickly at the end? Anything that you come here hoping to talk about that I failed to bring up?
No, I think we summarized it all really well here, and I appreciate the discussion. It's nice catching up, and it's been too long, so let's catch up soon.
Appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks, Antonio. Cheers.
And as always, thanks to everyone for watching Resource Talks. I have a couple of more things to say, though. The fact that this company was interviewed here today does not mean that they are necessarily a good or a bad company. I'm not here to endorse nor attack anyone. I am simply here to ask some questions. If you find that I have failed in asking a question that you would have liked to hear an answer to, which will happen as I'm not an experienced interviewer, please let me know and I will try to correct that mistake in a future interview. As mentioned at the beginning, please understand that mineral exploration and development is an extremely risky business. Losing money is the norm and should be the expectation. This is a very complex sector, and the performance of individual companies typically depends on many different moving particles, including company-specific factors like geology, financing ability, and many others, really, as well as particles that are outside of the company's control, like geopolitics, macroeconomics, commodity prices, and many more, most of which are nearly impossible to fully understand. Moreover, these companies that typically get interviewed on Resource Talks are in the pre-revenue stage, which means they rely on the public markets for the financing of their operations, which could result in shareholder dilution. Furthermore, as a general rule of thumb, you'll be better off understanding that all company communications online, albeit this interview or their website and their presentation and their social media accounts, or even the social media accounts which you thought were your friends and then told you about a stock, everything really that these companies do is intended as marketing. And although I do not make buy or sell recommendations because there is a clear conflict of interest given the nature of my business, many out there do. And you should be aware of that inherent bias and you should be careful out there. That bias is not always going to be clearly disclosed with everyone out there. So it is safer for you anytime you're watching any type of company specific content to approach it with a dose of skepticism and assume that the party telling you about it is biased in at least some shape or form, because there will always be a bias, again, albeit clear or not. So always ask yourself what the incentive of your counterparty is and never rely on them regardless of their incentives, but instead double check if what they're saying is true, again, by using setterplus.ca. The fact that I have no idea what I'm doing should already be clear to you at this point. I am not saying this to make jokes or laugh with myself. I just simply do not have a long enough track record of consistent investment profits. So I should, under no circumstances, be considered an authority on anything. Again, although this may sound amusing to you, believe me, it is not amusing and it is not intended as a joke. I'm simply pointing out a fact and warning you not to rely on anything I do or say. Unfortunately, at least to my understanding, nobody out there has any special abilities. The CEOs do not possess any superior knowledge, and they cannot know about what will go up, what will go down, or what will go in circles. Some people even believe that to be rule number one on Wall Street. Nobody really knows. None of us know whether any of the company's activities will result in a success, again, given that we're talking about high-risk activities where most of the times it ends in failure. Oh, so unfortunately, try as I may, I won't always catch all red flags or all challenges with the companies. So even if I did ask a few tough questions in here, don't rely on this being all of the tough questions. Again, these are complicated startups with many moving parts, and I am conflicted given the nature of this business. Therefore, I cannot guarantee the quality of anything presented in this video, and you cannot hold me responsible for any losses or damages stemming from the way you decide to use this interview. Viewers, listeners, and readers acknowledge and agree that the information presented herein did not constitute a solicitation or an offer to buy or sell any security or investment or to participate in any trading strategy. Resource Talks and all parties involved in the management of the business strictly disclaim any and all liability for losses and or damages, whether direct, indirect, special, or consequential, or Other consequences, however so caused, arising out of any use or reproduction of the content published by resource talks or any decision made or action taken in reliance upon it. By consuming this content, all consumers vow to release resource talks and all parties involved in the management of the business from all claims, proceedings, or consequences. This is all to say, I know it's a lot of lawyer talk, but this is all to say that you shouldn't blindly trust me or anybody on the internet, and you should do your own research. Once again, social media is meant for entertainment. It is setterplus.ca where you do your research. That's where you'll find the company's official filings, and I encourage you to read and analyze the Management Information Circular, the financial statements, the Management Discussion and Analysis, and whenever available, the NI 43-101 technical documents. If you don't understand everything in those documents, the chances of you losing money are even higher than they normally are in this space. And as mentioned earlier, the chances of even the best analysts in this sector losing money are extremely high, since this is venture capital and it is not for everybody. I'll leave you with one of Charlie Munger's quotes, which I wish I had listened to more often earlier on, which says, quote, "If you don't understand it, don't do it."